Okay, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. And welcome to our first program here at Savoy. My name is Bruce Patton. I'm the curator here at Savoy. Anybody first time being here? Oh yeah, a few. So welcome. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. What I'd like to do before we get into the program, I have a couple housekeeping things to let you guys know about. So what I want to do is kind of step through kind of some of the exhibits that we're going to have in 2024, some of the movies we have coming, and I'll let you know about a program that's going to be coming up pretty soon that you'll be interested in hearing about. Then I'll introduce Ken, and during the program, if you would hold your questions until the end, and then we'll have a couple microphones to go around so that you guys can use the microphone to ask your question, because we are recording it, and we won't be able to hear you on the recording if you don't have a microphone, okay? All right, thanks. And so you'll notice here on the screen what we have coming in 2024. You've probably seen the Wooden Wonders, but the next one to go in is Chip Foose. So many of you guys know Chip, great designer. We're actually going to get his cars that he personally drives. So it's one of those things that, you know, a lot of people don't think about, but what does Chip drive in his garage? What are his special cars to him? So I won't go through all these, but that's the next one to come in. So look for that. You may have noticed our current exhibits. Hopefully you enjoyed the rolling sculptures, the Wooden Wonders, Evolution of Bigfoot, which is going out here the first weekend in February. And then we have Wayne Kady here along with his cars and his artwork that you noticed. And then our Savoy collection. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the movies we have coming up. And you can kind of see, we just got done with the Fast and Furious. So that was a big turnout. I think we had about 120 people here. So that was great. We're doing a lot on the weekend nights, you know, so you can kind of come and bring a date. So hopefully you guys can take advantage of that. We have Grease coming up next month. So please come look on our website and see when that date is. And so here's a big announcement that because you guys are here, we're going to make. We just talked about Chip Foose and what is in Chip's garage. So Chip's actually going to be here. He's going to do a program on February 10th. And we'll have Ken back here to moderate for us. And that program we'll have the reception like we did here, and then also a program at 7 o'clock. And so look, next week we'll send out information. This will be a members only event. So, you know, make sure you're a member. And so that'll be coming up next week. You'll start getting information on it. Okay, great. So let me go ahead and introduce Ken. Many of you already know Ken because Ken is really part of the museum here. He's really helped us from the beginning. But maybe some of you don't know Ken. He was the first executive director of the Peterson Museum. For those who've been to LA, it's a beautiful museum. Ken's also been 32 years doing Pebble Beach as a concourse chief judge. He's written many books. I'm not sure what you're up to now, 26, 27, somewhere in that range, I think. 25, okay. Well, maybe we'll get... I think we have some ideas for you. So anyway, also, you know, Ken is part of the International Motor Press Association. He's won the Ken Purdy Award, and he's also in the Hall of Fame, right, for, Automotive Hall of Fame. So, and then every now and then he's kind enough to bring his wife, Trish, here to the museum. So go ahead, Ken. I'll let you take it away and introduce our guests also.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a frigid night, and we hope we'll be able to entertain and inform you a little bit tonight. I've been trying to think all evening of something clever I could say about the two Waynes, and I haven't been able to do that. So let me just.
Wayne's World?
Sorry?
Wayne's World?
Wayne. Yeah. See that's why.
How about the other Wayne?
That's why Wayne's the television star, and I'm not. I hate the cliche about someone who needs no introduction, but it's really true about Wayne Carini. He's the host and founder of Chasing Classic Cars. His career spans a wide variety. I mean, he's a genuine car restorer, extremely knowledgeable guy in our industry, respected. Spending a couple of days with Wayne is fascinating because the phone will ring and somebody's got a Cobra nobody's ever heard of, and they call Wayne to help sell it, or somebody else wants him to represent them with another car. So it's fascinating. I don't think, other than Jay Leno, I don't think I've ever walked anywhere where I've walked one step at a time because someone comes up. So Wayne is a genuine personality in our industry and a great friend of the Savoy. So thanks, Wayne, for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
And our guest of honor, so to speak, is Wayne Kady. And Wayne spent 38 years at General Motors. Not many people can make that statement and get out as respected and well-liked as he is. I hope many of you here have had a chance to look at the gallery of Wayne's renderings and some of the cars that he designed. We're going to hear a little bit more about that process this evening. He's basically a California farm kid from the San Joaquin Valley who went to Detroit and made a tremendous name for himself, and it's an honor to have him here this evening. So without further ado, I'll just put up a quick picture of our gallery. How many of you have had a chance to look at it? Oh, great. Wayne comes from an era where designers were artists. They were truly artists. They weren't just someone who could draw a straight line. They could do cars, they could do people. And we'll show you some of that this evening. They had to do that to sell their ideas, to bring cars into existence. Here's a somewhat younger Wayne working on a small clay model, and when Wayne began in the industry, General Motors had a really fabulous idea. They called it the Fisher Body Craftsman's Guild. Initially, they had young men, I'm sorry ladies, but it was mostly guys in this era, but they had young men all over the country, and they had them making these models, as you can see, of the Fisher Body coach. Somebody at General Motors got the bright idea, why are we having them build something, we know what it looks like, let's have them do cars of the future. So they had this contest all over the country where they offered scholarships and the opportunity to become an automotive designer. And at the same time, they were meeting all these talented young guys, and Wayne was certainly in that category. This is what a model car looked like, and you had to be more than just a young designer in that era. You had to be pretty skilled to build something that would catch the attention of the GM brass. And here you can see just a sample of what it looked like when these young men were sending in their models to be judged and hopefully to win a scholarship and so forth. So to Wayne, who began by building his own car when he was in high school, designing and building it. And we'll show it to you in a moment, but we'll have him tell you a little bit about it. You wanted to be a car designer from the outset, and this was your sort of first proof of concept, right?
That's right. But when I found out that you can earn a living at it, I thought, wow. And I saw an XK120 Jaguar, and I thought, wow, that's a beautiful car. And I couldn't afford one, so maybe I can make one. And I got pretty far along, never finished it, but I learned how to weld, how to graft sheet metal, how to do a lot of things that helped me in my career.
Do you think that was something that really helped you in the future, being able to work on a car? A lot of designers know how to draw cars, but they don't have any concept as to how to build them.
That's right. And I think just learning all those disciplines and then understanding all that's involved, and all the different people that are involved, you know, the engineers and the people that have to fabricate the tools and things like that, I think that helps. You're right, you can design something, but you know, if you can't build it, and if you can't build it for a profit, then why do you do it?
We were talking earlier today how, I mean, every car manufacturer changed their looks and designs of a car every year. Can you imagine what that process is in 12 months to come to fruition with a car, design it, tool it, build it, and make to make a profit too? Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the profit aspect. I mean, it was really something.
Well, if they didn't make a profit, they didn't need me.
That's right.
So that's basically, you know, it. But when we get into this car right here, for instance, it started out as a unique car, but to be unique, you have to be able to afford the tools for the numbers of cars that you're going to build and make a profit out of it. If you can't do that, then there's no point in building it. But this car started out as a narrower car, and then it ended up getting wider because we had to share a lot of components. We had to share the windshield and the cowl, black iron, and we shared some components with, I think Tornado was the other front-wheel drive car. And so by sharing all those parts, then if we can make the car look good enough for people to want to buy it, then that's the name of the game.
But perhaps I can interrupt for just a sec, Wayne, because before we get into that,
Yeah.
we have pictures of the actual car, I hope, that you built. Although, Blake, I'm having trouble with this button for some reason. We're not, oh, there we go. Yeah. Wayne went on to work for Bill Mitchell, and we'll talk about Mitchell in a moment, one of the most colorful design bosses ever. And Mitchell said, you don't rob a grocery store, you rob a bank. So in looking at a car to do, Wayne looked at a Jaguar XK120. So here he is in his car, and here's, maybe tell us a little bit about how far you got with this idea.
Well, that's about it.
Sorry?
That's about it. Then I went to college to learn how to draw cars to make a living off of it. And the car sat under an olive tree in my folks' side yard. And while I was gone, he sold the car, and I don't know what happened to it after that.
Oh, what a pity. Somewhere out there is this great, great design idea.
It's probably sunk into the soil by now.
Well, in this photograph where the line is coming down, that's Wayne, one of the young designers learning the basics. Do you recall who it is that's doing the instructing?
That's Strother McMinn, and he's a legendary...
That is Mac. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that's Mac. And
Yep.
the line's on there to demonstrate the sections through the car. And for us to understand, you know, the sections and what they mean, and also to develop the surface so that the highlights run through.
So Strother McMinn, who we all called Mac, was a beloved instructor at Art Center.
Yes.
And was really a product of the classic car era, as much an enthusiast as all of us are. So you were so fortunate you couldn't learn from, in many ways, a better teacher.
That's right.
And that's part of how it came. And we wanted to show you, these are some of Wayne's sketches. We'll do a little bit more of this and show some of the renderings. But along the way to a production car like that Cadillac, a lot of fantasy happens. There are ideas that are interpreted and reinterpreted. You can see these shapes with their long hood and the selfish cabins. These are exciting cars. Keep that picture in mind as you see some of the production cars, because they're not too different. But this also shows you the skill, this is before computer-assisted design, that young designers like Wayne had to have. You weren't just doing these sketches, you were getting the attention of top management, so they would look at this and say, you know, we want this fender line, or we want this tail light, we want this guy to do the next car. True?
That's right.
And you can see how they evolve and how futuristic they look. And these are cars from the 60s and 70s, if you can imagine. Wayne's skill goes, as you can see, doing this type of rendering, really bringing these cars to life, partly so that the General Motors management could look at these and say that they wanted this element, they liked this element, but you can see how the sketches evolve into finished work. Again, a great deal of artistic skill is involved. So Wayne had the chance to work for some of the top people in General Motors, and we wanted to tell a few Bill Mitchell stories because Bill Mitchell might have been one of the most colorful. Harley Earl, whose grandson is in our audience this evening, was the first director of art and color at General Motors, and Bill Mitchell took over from him.
Yeah.
You had a number of interesting Mitchell stories. We'll save the fish one for last. But as you all can see, he's a pretty colorful guy. I'm not sure I would have dared walk out of the house with that red suit on. And you can see at the last minute he left the red shoes for Judy Garland and wore white bucks. But a couple of tales about what Mitchell was like to work for as a boss.
Well, he was tough, but he knew what he wanted, and if you didn't give it to him, you tried to talk your way through it. Then he would get red in the face, and then he'd say some bad things, and he'd walk out, and you knew that you're in trouble. But he also understood that if he got everybody upset, then he wasn't going to get what he wanted, and everybody'd be uptight. It's a creative environment, and you have to be loose to come out with all these ideas. So he'd come back in a couple hours, and then he'd tell some off-color joke, and then everything seemed like it was back to normal again. Or he'd tell you, maybe you guys are too tight, maybe you ought to go out and get drunk. Something like that. Or maybe you ought to take a walk around the lake. There was a 12-acre pond in front of the tech center, and he would say things just to try to get you loosened up. And during that period, Mitchell was so successful with the designs that we were all doing that I think we were capturing almost half the market, the U.S. market. That was before we had all the competition from the Europeans and the Asian countries. Mm-hmm. And there was talk about Chevrolet being separated from General Motors. And
it was part of the antitrust movement.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So he was very successful. I mean, you can't argue with success, I guess.
He was famous for saying things like, if it's not dramatic, nobody is going to care. Or if one of the management people who was not a designer told him what he liked or didn't like, he'd say, you don't go to your tailor and tell him how to make your suit. When he was forced, if you will, to do small cars and design those, he said, this is like tailoring a dwarf.
Yeah.
So, and I think you got that every day from him, yes?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty funny. So we won't dwell too long on Mr. Mitchell, but I like this particular example. I think, Wayne, he said, well, you can tell us how he said it.
Okay, we were designing a 65 Cadillac, and the end of the front fender, just above the headlamps, he was never satisfied with it. He'd come in and out of the studio several times, and then he'd always tell us that we didn't have it, and he'd try to give us some direction, but nobody understood what he was talking about. Finally, he said, make it look like a Miller radiator. And that's what this is, a Miller race car. And it was that top part of the radiator, that chrome part. Now, we didn't copy it exactly, but that was the inspiration for what we understood he wanted.
Miller racing cars in the 1920s and 30s were among the best in the world, and they were beautifully designed. So there's a real Miller on the left, and here's the grill. And so Mitchell understood and had perhaps an obtuse way of telling people what he wanted, but he had a way of doing it. I put this picture up just because Bill Mitchell pretty much saved the Corvette. The red car is the famous concept car, which turned into a racing car, and he funded the whole program. He had Dr. Dick Thompson racing the car. which showed top management that not only did they have an exciting design, but they had a performance car, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Weren't they not supposed to race, and then he sort of hid the program
That's
from
the
them?
point.
And then they finally found out. He says, "I'll fund the whole thing myself."
Exactly.
And then look where it went.
Which, when you think about it, in a giant corporation like General Motors, it took a lot of guts
It did.
to do
That's right.
do something like that. Not quite sure. There we go. So one of the most famous stories about Bill Mitchell we want Wayne to tell you, and the Mako Shark concept car is here. And if you look in the lower right corner, you'll see the stuffed head of a shark. How do these two relate?
Okay, Mitchell wanted this car painted like the shark, the color gradations of that shark. And he'd been fishing someplace here in Florida, and he caught this shark and had it mounted, and he had it at his house. He kept telling the guys in the paint shop that it didn't look right. So they asked him if he would bring the shark in so that they can reference the shark. So what they did is, instead of repainting the car, they painted the shark to match the car.
And he didn't notice the difference at all.
Well, he was satisfied, I guess.
That's right.
I mean, they had the evidence right there.
There it is.
So Wayne had the opportunity in his career to mix and meet with some of the top GM people. That's Lloyd Royce, who went on to be the president of General Motors. And this is his boss, Mr. Humbert, who was the head of Pontiac Studio. And we put this picture up to show you the degree of detail that they had to do. I mean, look at the size and complexity of the model in front, the model in back. And they built full-size cars so that they could look at them, take them out in the light, and decide whether or not these design features would work. And you pointed out that the reason you're dressed up is that's how everybody went to work, right?
Well, I'm not, am I overdressed? I don't know.
You know, I mean,
Look at this guy's coat.
young people today, they go to work and, you know, almost wearing pajamas.
Yeah.
But this is the way that you went to work. What year was this?
Well, when I started in '61, if you didn't wear a suit, then you were kind of out of the dress code.
Not a sport jacket, a suit.
You wear a suit, yeah. If you wore a sport coat, then you're kind of second class kind of thing. I mean, it wasn't written, but that's kind of the situation.
And this is the designers, and they're bending down and they're sculpting the cars and stuff in a suit.
Yeah, well, that was a competition too. You know, designers compete against themselves or against the other designers to get the design that goes into production. So you have to look the part. And then when they went to casual, like Fridays, started off Fridays, now it's every day. I think they lost something. They're still doing good work, but I think they could have done better work if they didn't relax the dress code so far. I know when they relaxed the dress code, they went so far down that they had to tell some people to go home and then change and come back, because they had messages on their shirts and everything else. It was a different time.
Didn't you say when you first started you could only afford one suit?
Yes.
And Mitchell and the other guys were wearing expensive suits.
Well, I mean, you look at Mitchell and Jordan and Jack Humbert and guys like that, they were wearing suits that probably cost, you know, equivalent to today, probably $5,000-$6,000, you know, in today's dollars.
As much as the car cost.
Yeah. I mean, and they'd have custom-made suits. The shirts were custom-made.
So what we're looking at in the picture there was a clay model, but also that's a real clay car in the back. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a full-size clay model.
Full-size clay model of the
And the
car.
interesting part about that is that the clay model in the foreground, I think it's 3/8 scale, and we would do a lot of them because you can model a 3/8 scale a lot faster than you can a full-size clay. And then you can have a variety of look to a car that you can put next to each other and have a look. And sometimes we'll only do a half a car and then put a mirror up against it and then do the other half, you know, with a different design so that it it gives you two designs, but without the extra work.
And in the picture, it looks like everybody's really working together.
That's probably for the picture.
Okay, good. I was waiting for you to say that.
Blake, if you can hear me, I don't think this is working. We might need to tell you to change slides. There we go, great. So these are more of the renderings that Wayne would do. And again, you look at how amazingly futuristic these cars look, particularly the one on the top right, but look below it, and you really can see Cadillac Eldorado. I mean, this is where it all came from. I'm going to need you to switch. There we go. Yeah, there was an opportunity, I think it's fair to say, that you could really indulge fantasies here. I mean, the lower car is a 16-cylinder Cadillac, but it has some cues, particularly the rear, I guess, of where they went, right?
We ended up with that design on the Bustleback Seville, the 80 Seville, which we originally tried to sell as a 79 Eldorado, and when Mitchell wanted to be a part of the meeting with Ed Kennard was the general manager then, and we showed it to Kennard. He said, "No, I don't want it. I'm not going to buy that car." And then so Mitchell asked me, "Well, would you look at it as a Seville?" He probably had that intent to begin with, and then he said, "Yeah, I'll look at it," but I think he was getting ready to retire, and he probably didn't have to face up to it. So that's how it's probably placating Bill.
I think we need the next, there we go, great. We went one too far though. There we are. Oop. Yeah, I just wanted to call your attention to the fact that they didn't just draw cars. If you're looking here, you can see a fantastic looking car of the future, if you will, and here it is in a Greek or Roman column setting with marble and so forth. I'm not sure what it was like when someone pulled out a sketch like this, but I would imagine some people were envious.
Well, that's a black and white it's a watercolor painting.
Mm-hmm.
And not too many people did watercolors back then because a lot of people weren't really comfortable with it, but I liked it and I would do it, and I was fortunate that they allowed me the time to do them.
So we put this up to show you a couple of things, and Wayne can tell us a little bit about it, but it's a Buick full-size clay model. You can see these folk are fussing over it, scraping the surface to get that 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch that makes the line perfect. Mm-hmm. But this car, you look at it, it doesn't look too radical, but apparently it was, right?
Well, this was a car that we were working on for Buick for the 78 Riviera. And the salespeople for Buick saw it, and they went back and reported to George Elgis, who was the general manager of Buick at the time, that they thought it was controversial because they had lived with the boat tail, and Buick was very conservative at the time. They didn't like the boat tail, and they kind of apologized even to the dealers over it. So they were pushing to change that, and I was picked to change the boat tail. We changed it to make it more of a conventional looking car, but it didn't add any sales. In fact, we spent a lot of money and didn't improve the sales, so that was kind of a wasted effort, I thought.
Well, weren't you called into Mitchell's office and he just said, go to Buick and fix this problem, and you didn't even know what the problem was?
No, I didn't even know. I had no idea what the problem was, but my boss, Jack Humbert, met me outside of Mitchell's office, and he walked me to the studio, and we were walking to the studio, explaining, what was going on. And there was, the problem was that we had two bosses. As a chief designer, you have two vice presidents that are dealing with the product. You've got the divisional vice president, who is responsible for the car, for the whole line of cars. And then you've got a vice president in charge of styling, or I used to call it styling when I first started, and they changed it to design. But the guy that was responsible for design, Bill Mitchell, would like something, and then he would okay it with us. We'd complete the program, we'd release it, but then the division, if they didn't like it, they'd create some problems for us, and then they'd tell Mitchell that they didn't like it, they'd change their minds, and the releases were being late, and as the releases were being late, that meant they had to work overtime to catch up on the programs and that kind of thing. So there was also conflict between the divisional general manager and Mitchell. And Mitchell thought, nobody's going to tell me how to design a car. And these guys weren't trained to design cars, they were trained to sell cars. But, they both had equal responsibility, and then here, guys like me are in the middle.
Didn't he say
what do you do?
at some point that to the VP, everybody hates you?
That has to do with this car here. We're signing this car, and I got that far with it, and the salespeople came in, and they saw it, and they thought it was controversial. And so they went back, told Elgis that it was controversial, and they didn't like it. So Elgis, who I had a decent rapport with, called me up and said, I want to see what the Cadillac and the Tornado look like.
The
I says,
Auotmobile.
George, I can't show them to you. Mitchell will have to show them to you. And so he said, well, I'm coming down Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And I said, well, I've got a dental appointment Saturday, and I can't be there till probably about 11 o'clock. When I got there, the guard told me not to go to the studio, go directly to Mitchell's office. When I get to Mitchell's office, he's red-faced, and he's really upset, and he says that he made some references to some obscene references to the Buick general manager, and he told me, don't you show them the Tornado or the Eldorado. I said, well, I know, it's not my place, and so so then I left his office, and I'm walking down the hall, and Jack Humbert met me, and we're walking back to my studio, and he's telling me what went on. They'd already had a confrontation in my studio before I got there. And so when I walk in, Elgis, who I'd had a rapport with, was very cold towards me. He said, I want to see the Eldorado and I want to see the Tornado. And I says, George, it's not my place. I don't run the building. I can't show them to you. And he says, well, who can? I said, well, Mitchell will have to do it. He says, well, call him. I just came from his office, He told me I could. So anyway, I go towards my office to make a call, and Mitchell comes through the door, and they're kind of getting into each other a little bit. And then he tells Elgis, says, okay, I'll show you the Eldorado and the Tornado. And as we're walking down the hall, he's berating the way he's dressed. Mitchell berating the general manager of Buick. And then he shows him the Cadillac, and then he shows him the Oldsmobile, and neither one of them, had any design to amount to anything. So we get back to the studio. I can see, I'm kind of in the middle of it. They both kind of got their fists doubled up, and I'm thinking, and then I'm looking in the corner of my eye, and Jack Humbert's looking for a place to hide. And I'm in the middle, where do you go? And then finally Mitchell tells Elgis, nobody likes you, not even Kady. And walks out. So then Elgis is looking at me, he says, is that true? I said, no, that's not true. I mean, he doesn't speak for me.
He threw you under the bus.
He threw me under the bus.
Only the head of design could see all the division's cars. The individual division managers, head of Cadillac, head of Oldsmobile, they couldn't see what the competition looked like. It made it difficult for a designer in the middle. Here's the boat tail that everybody wanted, and you can see here's Buick advertising. They were obviously excited about the look of this car on a Riviera. And here's another example of some of the competition that went on. The tall man who's gesturing to the ground is Chuck Jordan, who was one of the General Motors heads of design. And you can see his guys are saying to him, he's saying, that's the dumbest looking front end I've ever seen. Well, look at that front end and then look at Chuck Jordan, and you can see they've cartooned it so the front end of the car looks like the head of the design department.
The guy that did the cartoon was way over on the left. And he really captured, like, Jack Humbert, and that's Jerry Hirschberg standing next to him with his hand on Jack's shoulder. And Jack used to have a suit like that, too, the red lining.
He was trying to out Mitchell with a red lining and a black suit. Yeah. But nobody out Mitchell, I don't think.
Jack was really a nice guy and really a good designer, real gentleman.
We're showing you these again in some detail because this again is before computer-assisted design. The elegance of this work is extraordinary. So after a design program was over, what did they do with these sketches?
Well,
this will shock you.
They were supposed to be thrown out, and there are a few people that probably took them out illegally. Nobody wanted to get caught because you get fired. But if your boss deemed that they were obsolete, they would give you a package pass. And some guys were more strict than others. Fortunately, I had a boss that allowed me to take the drawings out that were obsolete. So I got them.
So the package pass means you could get past the guard without any problem.
Yes, that's right.
Can you imagine throwing some of this artwork away?
Yeah.
We're lucky that Wayne in particular got to save a great deal of it. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, Robert Edwards has been collecting this for years and years, and he was trying to put a movie together. And he interviewed a lot of retired designers, and he was going to put a documentary together because he looked at it as fine art.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
So today, these are collector's items. There are a few people around the country. Jeff Goldstein in Warwick, Rhode Island, has a wonderful collection. Going to the individual older designers and asking, did they save anything? Would they sell it to go to a small museum? So that's the fate of a lot of this great work. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Now, again, look at these, think El Dorado, and you're seeing some absolutely beautiful work. The lower car, Wayne, probably a little more fantastic. The upper car looking more like a production car, would you say?
Well, there are elements off of it that ended up in production, like the D-line and the rear fender kick-up. That's about it off of that sketch. But the job of the chief designer was to collect all these ideas and put them together in one viable design. So it was kind of like if it was an orchestra, he's pulling in the horns and the drums, and he's pulling in all this stuff and putting it together to make music.
To make music, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Would you tell us the story about the engineer? One of the challenges for designers, they could design anything. I mean, they could sketch it, but somebody had to build it. They had to stamp panels, and you had a good relationship with the engineers.
Right. And this car here is an example of it. When we were working on this design, the car divisions were responsible for the front clip of the car. And Fisher Body was responsible for the body, I mean, from the cowl rearward. And I think the divisions were responsible for the rear bumper, but all the wiring and everything was Fisher Body. When we got into making this car, the dye engineer, a guy named Wally Satarsky, and he would come in, and he smoked a lot back then. Everybody smoked, whether you smoked or not, everybody else did, so you inhaled all that. But anyway, he came in, and he'd sit down. I'd get him a cup of coffee, and actually we had a pot of coffee. Every time he'd come in, we'd actually make a pot, because he drank a lot of coffee and smoked a lot of cigarettes. I'd get a big ashtray and set him down by the car. He'd look at it and study it and study it and study it. And I'd say, Wally, what do you want me to change? Do I have to change anything? And I was trying to be considerate. And he he looked at me and said, I don't know how to make it, but don't touch anything. Don't change anything yet. So I said, Wally, my timing on this thing means I got to release it pretty soon. So let me know if you need any changes so that I can make those changes. Because that affects the rear of the car as well. Because you want the car to look like it's, the front ties in with the rear and the side, so it looks like one person or one team did the whole car. And when he left, several weeks went by and I hadn't heard from him. So I called him up and I said, Wally, how are we doing on that hood? And he said, well, I'll send you down what I have. And somehow or another, he got the surface information, and he made a Kirkside die, which is Kirkside die is soft, some kind of soft steel. I don't understand it completely, but I guess it's tooled easily so that you could make a few parts. And he stamped out the hood, and I looked at it, and the thing is all one piece. And I thought, wow. And because the 67 through 70 Eldorado was a two-piece hood, and what they do is they weld the front and then the back together, and then they have a depression where the molding fits in, and that camouflages the central part of the hood where it's attached. And when they metal finish it, they weld it and then they smear lead on it, and then they have to file it off, and that costs about $1 an inch, I think, back then. So we had about 9 inches. So 9 inches at $1 an inch times however many cars you're going to make is a lot of money. I think he saved about $750,000 back then. So in today's
making it one piece.
Making it one piece. And I asked him, how the hell did you do that? And he says, well, I had to use a binder. I said, what's a binder? He explained it to me. And I said, okay, I want you to come in. I want you to look at the back of the car because I'm going to have that issue with Fisher Body because they're a lot more conservative. So when Fisher came in, the head guy, which was Carl Hadeen, and he was like the vice president of Fisher Body. I think that's either that or the chief engineer or something. Anyway, they're lined up about 7 or 8 of them, and the guy that had to make it was the first guy sitting. He was kind of leaning over, looking at the model, kind of shaking his head, and then everybody else was kind of shaking their head as well. And I'm standing next to Carl Hadeen, and I said, Carl, what if they used a binder and hit it at about a 45-degree angle? That's what Wally had told me how he would make it. He looked at me like, how would you know anything about a binder? I didn't, I just But anyway, he talked to the guy that was shaking his head closest to the car, and he said, what about if you use a binder? He acted like that was really a wild idea. Yeah, we'll look at it. And that was it.
Back then, Fisher made the bodies.
Yes.
And General Motors made the front. So the front, they'd meet at the factory and they'd assemble everything together. Is that correct?
The divisions were responsible for the sheet metal.
Right.
Yeah, for tooling of the sheet metal, stamping the parts.
But sometimes these cars were actually painted in 2 different places.
Yeah,
too.
if you remember back in 1959, a lot of the GM cars, the paint didn't match the front fender to the body.
Yeah.
And that was because they were painted at 2 different locations, and then the temperature of the paint was probably different from different.
Right. Yeah.
And that made the difference.
Yeah, for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I just love the idea that here's the designer telling the body engineers how to do their job, and it worked.
Well, I liked Wally. Wally would go out of his way to give you whatever he liked, whatever you wanted. And I thought that you have to respect somebody's opinion that would go that far. And I always had so much respect for him that I thought, why not find out how he would do it and then use that to get what I want for the rest of the car. Otherwise, I'd have to change the rest of something else on the car. Can
we do the next slide? Yeah. Again, this is, if you look closely at this car, you'll see that while it's a very modern shape, it has fenders. Now, how did that come about, and who wanted that?
That was Mitchell. It was Bill Mitchell was inspired by, I don't know whether it was a movie that he saw or something, but he was inspired by these 4 separate fenders on a car. And that's how we started this program. In fact, he had everybody in the building looking at it. And we modeled a number of scale models with that concept of 4 different fenders with different shapes and so forth. And that's how this program started. But then as the car got wider, then it wouldn't work, because if you go beyond 80 inches, then you have to have clearance lights on the car, because then you're getting into truck territory.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's probably safe to say that in this era, they were less concerned about safety, if you will, and they were just getting into the 5-mile-an-hour bumpers.
Right.
And that added a whole different constraint for you, I think.
73.
Yeah.
73, we start getting into the 5-mile-an-hour bumpers. And that's when you start seeing the offsets, and then the cars started to grow. In fact, we grew to a point where Cadillac had done a survey with a lot of their dealers, not dealers, but their buyers, and they found that their garages, a lot of these homes, they had big homes, but they were older garages that weren't designed for cars like the size we were building.
The cars are too big for your garage.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
But that was during an era, after Harley Earl, it was like longer, lower, and wider. Mm-hmm. And that's what you tried to do.
Funny. Sometimes some ideas were done. You're a car enthusiast. You're familiar with Pontiac Safaris and Chevy Nomads. So have a look at this Cadillac for a moment and see what you see. How far did this idea get, Wayne?
About that far.
Would have been pretty cool to have a sporty Cadillac station wagon. Yeah. I mean, it made it as far as a Clay with a roof line, but I guess
General Motors didn't build them, but O'Gara, a lot of coach companies
right.
Did build some Cadillac station wagons.
Yeah, I saw one in Arizona one year, and I think they built it for the guy that used to jump motorcycles, Evel Knievel.
Yeah.
I think he had one.
Mm-hmm.
But they used a B-body roof, and they grafted it to the fenders, the quarter panels.
But who would ever think that the CTSV wagon would ever come back and at Cadillac
right.
and be so successful? I mean, they made a limited production of them, but putting a Corvette chassis underneath a Cadillac and making a station wagon out of it is really cool.
And we were talking about that earlier, because here's a very sporty Cadillac wagon that was not well received when it first came out, and now?
Now very collectible.
Yeah.
I'm happy to own one.
You've been looking at some of these sketches, and here's something very close to a production car, but there is a little secret about it if you look at the Landau roof. But they never did this, Wayne, either, right?
No, it was just a concept idea. And we just mocked it up, and that was it.
Now, this was in an era, though, when they were starting to think about taking convertibles out of production. Is that correct?
Well, the last convertible was 76. The last production convertible was 76. But then people like American Sunroof were taking a coupe, and they'd cut the top off and reinforce the frame.
But never did a good job at that either.
No. Interesting part about this car is that it's got an inward folding top. The top doesn't fold like a standard convertible where the rails come down parallel to each other and into a well, which meant that you had to have a wide well for the rails to park. This one goes into a scissors motion. The rails scissors to the center, and then they fold down. And the reason for that is so you can get a full-width rear seat. And it started out as a parallel design or a symmetrical design, and then when it came through Fisher Body, then it was an asymmetrical version. And then it had a yaw. When I put the top down in this car, it would come, and then it would tilt a little bit to the right and make a couple of creaking noise, and then it'll go down. And I kept wondering, why would they do that? And then I had a friend that had a Chrysler four-door convertible, 31, I think, or 32, somewhere around there. And it had an inward folding top, but it was symmetrical. And I thought, well, maybe there was some kind of a patent infringement that they had to make it asymmetrical. So even though it's the same idea, it's a modification of that idea. And maybe that's how they got away with it.
All the little things you never think of when you look at some of these cars, what a challenge it was to build them. One of the things that Wayne did extremely well, and not every designer could do it, was not only draw, sketch, render these cars themselves, but he did a wonderful job on people. And people give the cars a perspective and a scale, and they make selling a concept like this perhaps a little bit easier because you could imagine it in the context of people. Again, some of these wonderful ideas like this vent behind the wire wheels, if you notice, didn't make it into production, but that elegant couple is all Cadillac. It could have been a Cadillac ad, and not many designers had the skill to make that happen. Oh, we went right by this absolutely crazy idea, which, in a minute, sorry. Tell us about this, Wayne. I'm not sure what was going on with this spaceship, but...
I don't know either. This is a project at Art Center. When I showed my portfolio to Clara McKeegan, this was in my portfolio, and it demonstrates, your ability to render a concept and put it in an environment that helps sell the idea. And I don't even remember what the program
Well, also
was.
it's interesting, she's in a bathing suit. He seems to be wearing a matador costume.
Yes,
And it's watercolor, I think, yes?
it is.
So
it is watercolor.
again, difficult medium to have something look as precise and cool as this. As this.
That was a three-wheel car too, wasn't it?
Three-wheel car.
Yeah.
We were fooling around with different configurations.
These are, of course, are a little more like it from a production point of view. Can we do the next slide? Yeah. I mean, again, you can see all the different things they tried, and within the time period, as Wayne mentioned earlier, Wayne Carini mentioned, there were definite time constraints. I mean, you could only fool around and sketch and imagine so long when they had to stamp metal and make cars. And while you can see elements on these concepts that made it into production, you can only imagine the sheer number of variations before you got here. Oops. There we go. So Wayne's own cars, a couple of them are here. Tell us why, of all the cars you designed and all the cars at GM, what about these three do you like best, and why you wanted to keep them?
Well, the Corvette I didn't have anything to do with the styling of, but that belonged to my younger brother, and he died at an early age. So I inherited the car, and I brought it from California, stripped the paint off it, took it all apart, and restored it. So I thought, I've got these cars, and I in the wintertime in Florida when the weather's bad, I thought, well, I'll do a rendering of my cars. So that's how it started. So I did the Corvette first, and then I did the 67 Eldorado, the black one. And that car belonged to my sister and brother-in-law, and they had it in California. It had been sitting out in their yard for about 7 years, hadn't run because every time they'd have a problem with it, it was a lot of money to fix it. So they bought another car and they left it there, and then it got to a point where it was cluttering up the yard, so they wanted to get rid of it. My sister said she was going to have it scrapped. And when she told me that, I said, no, I'll take it. So I had a friend who went there and put an electric fuel pump on it and got it running, and then took it to a yard where I could have it shipped back to Michigan. And I stripped the paint off of that top and restored that car as well. In fact, I was working on it so much, I had it in my front yard. At about 9:30, my wife opens the door and she said, "If you love that car so much, why don't you take it to bed with you?" So
You cleaned up, didn't you?
I put my tools away.
You were probably just this far from a neighborhood intervention. You know, the Kadys are wonderful people, but they're turning the neighborhood into a junkyard.
I truly believe that that's one of your best work. I mean, I just love
Okay.
67.
The chief designer for that car was a guy named Stan Parker. And there was other designers that were involved with that. Don Roper, I think, and I'm trying to think of the other two.
But you were
guys.
at Cadillac at that point.
Yeah, I was.
You were part
I
of the
was
design
involved in
team.
that design of that car as well.
That's a
But
beautiful car.
but I didn't do all this by myself. There were other people that were involved. You know, we have a team, and you just have to pick.
That's how you win a football game.
That's right.
That one guy.
Right.
Would you say something about the origin of the our last car up here with the Bustle back? Wasn't Mitchell influenced by Rolls Royces in London? And
Well, I was fooling with that car before Rolls-Royce, I mean, before Mitchell even saw it. But Mitchell's involvement in that was to tighten up all the lines, put creases on it. Because if you notice some of the first illustrations that were shown, they had radiuses and maybe a couple of crease lines, but not everything being creased. Whereas this car, everything is creased. You know, the roof panel, the fenders, the deck lid, and
didn't he say that a pair of pants was nothing without a crease in them?
well, yeah, he used to say, right, exactly. A suit doesn't look right unless it's got a crease. And I think he probably had an extra pair of trousers that were there, you know, for each suit he wore. If he was going to have a meeting, he'd probably change so he wouldn't have to sit down and get a crinkle in it.
But the Seville was an interesting car too, in that it was the first car that they experimented with the sound system in the car, and Bose actually made the first sound system, their own sound system for that, and put it in a Cadillac.
Okay.
In this particular car, yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
kind of,
we're almost to our Q&A period, but I wanted to show you, we'll blast through Wayne's retirement really quickly. Some of his post-retirement projects are working on cars like this, a futuristic LaSalle, a possible Duesenberg, even Packards. But what Wayne does really beautifully, once an artist, always an artist. So here is a rendering, a painting of a barn, of a horse. You've never really stopped being an artist, have you?
no, I still paint. I still have a good time. When the weather's bad, usually is when I do it. Keeps me into it, and it just makes you feel good.
Well, you're,
Like you accomplished something.
you certainly have over your career, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, truly.
Fantastic career. You brought us some beautiful cars, and we became good friends about 10 years ago, and it's great to be your friend.
Thank you.
Well, we're at a point where we could entertain some questions, so
Can I introduce my
certainly.
son? My son Brian is here,
yep.
and he flew in from
Come on, Brian,
Texas
stand
just
up.
to be here. And Shelley and Natalie from General Motors, who are here someplace.
Hey.
Natalie helped put this show together and then gave us support from her end. And where's Shelley? Shelley's here too.
Oh.
Hi, Shelley. Thank you for all your efforts. And I'd like to thank the Savoy Museum for allowing this. And I think, you know, it's a wonderful thing. It preserves something that could have been lost.
Mm-hmm. Well,
What a wonderful museum.
well deserved, I'll tell you that. Well deserved. Thank you.
Okay,
Questions?
so we'll take it open for questions. So I have a mic and Tom has a mic, so we'll pass it on.
All right, since I just found out that GM is actually here, my question may be for them then. Given that car right next to you is, 54 years old, what aspects of that 54-year-old car would you like to see on modern Cadillacs? What do you miss the most?
I mean, I don't know how you do that because everything's an SUV.
Good answer.
You know, it's hard to go back and be critical of what they're doing now, because I don't understand, what their market is and why they're doing what they're doing. You can say you like it or you don't like it, but unless you understand what they're trying to accomplish and who their customers are, then you're just pontificating. And I don't want to do that.
I think personally, the best explanation is the romance is gone, and now it's just business.
I think the 60s and 70s were an entirely different era, but back then, fuel was pretty cheap too. I mean, this car probably if I baby it on the freeway at 50 miles an hour, it probably gets 10 miles a gallon.
Right.
Gloriously, but 10 miles to the gallon.
My question is, how many hours, days, and weeks does it take to render one of your drawings?
It all depends. Sometimes, I'm doing it for 8 hours a day. So maybe 3 days for a real complicated one. 3-4 days maybe, once I have the design. Sometimes less if I got lucky.
And Wayne explained too that they were all on paper. So when you're a young artist, you would go over the paper too, because every piece of paper cost money, and it was. But when you went to General Motors, you had plenty of paper.
Right. Well, the sketches. We used to sketch on vellum with colored pencil, and when I was at art school, you had to buy that vellum. Vellum was expensive, so you'd have to be really careful that make every piece of paper count. And sometimes you turn it over and do it on the other side and that kind of thing. But when you're at a corporation and they're buying the materials that you're working with, then you're not concerned about the cost. And we had a lot of scrap rates, so you would sometimes you'd have maybe 15, 20 ideas that are in a trash can sitting next to you within maybe a couple hours worth of work. But what they were after were the ideas, and they had to get them out of your head. And then the ideas that you have also influence other designers, so that the guy sitting next to you see an idea that you're working on, and then he'll think, wow, he'll interpret it a different way, and he might have a better interpretation of your idea than you do, and that's how this thing works. So we kind of fed off each other.
But you were saying today with computer-assisted design, they're all locked into their screens like kids on a cell phone, and that's lost, I guess, that interaction.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, my take on it is, but not being there to understand, it's easy to comment.
Yes, gentlemen, can you maybe, Wayne, describe some of the conversations you had with the engineers about aerodynamics as you would design these cars and get some pushback from them?
I don't remember getting any pushback from the engineers on aero, because we had a goal for fuel economy, and we'd have to bring these cars. Well, we really didn't start doing that until about the mid '80s. This car was never aerodynamically tested, but about in the mid '80s, we used to take the cars over to the Lockheed Wind Tunnel over near Atlanta, and then we'd take a clay model and then we'd aero test it, and we'd modify it a little here, a little there to get the car to have a coefficient of drag to meet a goal that they gave us as part of the fuel economy goal. So not only would they take the weight out of the car, but fuel economy played a part of it. And the other thing about it is that there was side glass contamination. And like the mirrors, I mean, this was never tested, but the newer cars have mirrors that are aero, so that if you live in an area where you have like a salt spray and it crusts the side glass, and all of a sudden you can't see, you'd have to stop the car and either roll the window down in the freezing weather. Those mirrors, I say some of them, not all of them. Now, I had a guy in one of my studios that really concentrated on that, and he got the aerodynamics of that mirror where it was only I think one count. And not only that, it it cleared the area aerodynamically around the vision to the mirror from the driver's eye point. So, I mean, these are little things that you wouldn't think about, but they're a great benefit to the value of the car.
Wayne, real quick, in all the cars that you were, a part of in building, which was your favorite you were most proud of, and which weren't, what car wasn't your favorite?
I mean, that's like asking you which one's my favorite kid. and I've only got one kid here. But probably the least favorite was the Cimarron. But that car was put together, just in a few months. In fact, I flew out to Boyd Coddington from California just to buy a wheel from him to put on that car, and we changed the grille and the taillights and a couple of little details. But they put a nice interior in it, and they charged over $12,000 for it. I think twice with the Chevrolet version of it. But originally that car was supposed to come off of the Buick Skylark. We'd mocked it up and everybody liked it, but then there wasn't a plant to build it because that plant was going out of service. So,
What's your favorite?
What's your favorite? Yep.
I don't know. I should point to this car because it's the first one that I was responsible for, the look of. The 67, everybody loves the 67. And I think that's a beautiful car. That was under Stan Parker, and I was on that team. This I was responsible for, and the challenge was to make a car with what we had to work with. And making the car 5 inches wider on the inside was a challenge. Using the B-body was a challenge. Saving money on the hood was a challenge. The front center bar is a common piece with the DeVille and the Fleetwood. We had to make it lifter. If I didn't tell you that, you probably wouldn't even know it. So there's more of a challenge with this, and the reward was that we sold in I think 7 or 8 years that this car was in production. I'm trying to remember the numbers. I had it written down someplace. I think I forgot to bring them. But anyway, the 67 through 70 Eldorado sold, I think, about 90,000 units. And this car sold, I think, about 300,000. And then the one after that, the 79 through 85 Eldorado, sold even more than this did per year. 1 year we were up to, I think, better than 70,000 units for the Eldorado, and a high percentage of them were the Baritz option, which was a big moneymaker. That's with the stainless cap and the half cap on the back. Stainless steel molding.
Is there a design element that you particularly went to bat for and fought for that made it into production that wouldn't have if you hadn't?
Well, I think the Seville, but then I had backing from Mitchell, the Bustle back Seville. Now that car is controversial, and there are people that hate it, but there are people that love it too. And we sold a fair amount of them. But what happened was that they increased the price over the 79 to the 80 model by $4,000, and they put a diesel engine as standard. And the diesel engine was problematic. And then they had the V8 6.4, was another problematic engine, and then they had the HT 4100 engine. So there were some issues. In fact, I was at a dealer council meeting that I was invited to in Arizona with about a dozen dealers on the council, and they were literally calling the general manager and chief engineer SOBs to their face. I mean, it was ugly. And I was there, and I was invited there because the Seville was controversial. They probably thought I would take up some of the flack. Nobody ever accused me of designing a car that left them stranded. or at the dealers.
There's a lot of that going around now with electric cars, so you didn't have to worry about that.
Especially in the cold.
That's right. Bruce has got another question.
Mr. Kady, your friends across town at Ford were doing Lincolns and this, that, and the other. And did you have a symbiotic relationship with your competition across town? You were paying attention to what they're doing. They had good ideas that you liked or didn't or whatever. Did you guys ever get together at the local bar and talk about whatever, or was that completely off the record?
I never did. There might have been people that, went to school together and talk or get together. I don't know. But you're right. The Lincoln Versailles had a little bit of that bustle back a year afterwards, and so did the Chrysler Imperial with the line going down off the sail panel. I thought the Imperial was a beautiful car. They did a good job with that whole car. But it was different. At least, I don't know, maybe they were just being cautious.
I think we have one or two more.
Yep, we got two more here. Dom's going to go first.
Oh, one other thing I want to mention here before, can I mention?
Sure.
Fred Meinberg and his son are here. They're from in fact, Fred lives on my street. And he's a good friend of mine. And Al Mata is there someplace. Say hi, Al. Fred owns that 66 Cadillac Eldorado convertible, that light green Eldorado convertible. And I told him if he ever has to change a taillight on that, I can tell him how to do it.
Got to take the bumper off?
I was just interested in who or what influenced your designs. Like, where did you get your motivation and your kind of your ideas of how to design a car like this?
Like this?
Yeah. Whether external influences on your design techniques and the things that you might have saw or people that you were influenced by.
I think I started out with a beveled hood, and I don't remember exactly why. Maybe to reduce the height of the car, and that led to the bevels. And then the four fender thing, it was a natural to bring the bevel on the fenders together, and then the lead in to the rear fender with that scoop. So it gives you kind of an illusion of a four-fendered car, but not really. So it's saving the concept in a fat way.
Got one more here.
When I see an automobile, I always decide from my rear view mirror looking at it from coming towards me in the back if I like it by the face. And I'm just curious, am I the only one that sees a face on the car, or is it something you consider when you're designing? The face, like the face on the pickup truck?
Well,
if it's the Predator, very aggressive, very aggressive. Other faces on cars, very nice, smile, beautiful.
Well, Harley Earl used to say that the face of the car is the most important part of the car. And you're right in that respect. But I think you spend a lot of time looking at the back of a car, especially at a light. So I've always thought the back of the car is important too. And then we've run through the era where they had fins, and then what else do you do? And that's kind of why I did the Seville Bustle back, so that if anybody copied, you get credit for it.
Bruce, we have time for one more, or we? No?
Say, is there one more? Otherwise, okay, we got one more, and then we'll stop.
On the slide, you briefly talked about Packards or redesigning Packards, or what? I just wonder what that was about.
Okay. After I retired, I belonged to a group called Retired let me see, League of Retired Designers. And there was a guy from Dalton, Georgia, trying to think of his name right now. But anyway, he wanted to be a designer. He never made it as a designer. And he was into Cadillacs, and he had a lot of Cadillacs over the years. And then he became the president of the Cadillac LaSalle Club. And he would call retired designers and ask them if they'd be interested in participating in a design project. And that's how it started. We started out, the first project I think was for a redesign of a Cadillac, and I had recently retired, and I didn't want it to look like sour grapes if I was involved trying to design with and compete with the guys that are, the professionals that were still there. And so I didn't get involved. And a couple of years later, we started getting involved in designing of cars that were no longer existing, like orphan cars. And then we would do, like one of them was a LaSalle, I think, and then one of them was a Packard, one of them was a Duesenberg. I think I did a Cord at one time, Studebaker, that kind of thing.
So basically a modern design, but using some cues
interpretation
from
of
a lot of grills and
right.
things like that from.
Yeah, that's what that was.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you all very, very much. We don't want to run over time, but special thanks to Wayne Kady for his reminiscences, and to Wayne Carini, who always is a great guest to have. We really appreciate you all coming tonight. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks. Yep. Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you back here at the next event. Have a good evening.